Oh, one Sentry Mode event. Let's take a look. Wait. What the f? Hey everyone, so today I'm going to talk about TeslaCam and how to make it a little bit better. So I think by now everyone is familiar with TeslaCam. Basically, if you've got a Tesla or if you've seen Tesla videos, you know that the car has a dashcam feature inbuilt. So that's that icon on the left there. And it's also got something called Sentry Mode. So that's the icon on the right. So if you turn on Sentry Mode while your car is parked, if someone approaches your car, then it will basically record a short clip of what that person did around your car. Now, we all know that accessing these footage is actually quite difficult. So down here in the center console, you don't have a tray here, but if you remove the tray and you look down here, you'll see some controllers, but don't mind the controllers. Underneath this panel, I have a Tesla hub here, but forget the hub. Down here, you can plug in a USB thumb drive. So instead of plugging in a thumb drive, I've plugged in a Raspberry Pi. So with this Raspberry Pi, I'm actually able to access this footage wirelessly through its access point, so I don't have to always unplug a thumb drive and plug it into my phone or a computer. So that's how I managed to view the footage in that intro without actually having to unplug anything. So just to demonstrate this again, I've got my phone here and I've opened a file browsing app. So any old file browsing app will work as long as it supports SMB shares. So down here you see SMB connection. So SMB just means Samba. I've already connected my phone to the Raspberry Pi's access point, so the Tesla USB device is already showing up. Now inside that you'll see the familiar looking TeslaCam directory, and inside there you should see 3 familiar looking directories as well. So it should have Sentry Mode clips, saved clips, and recent clips. So there it is, Sentry clips, save clips, and recent clips. So we're just going to go to recent clips. So recent clips is just like your driving footage. So let's just choose a random video here. So there you go, there's some old driving footage that I have. So yeah, you can view all this wirelessly, and if you are interested in getting this kind of setup, some people have actually they've actually commercialized this similar product. Basically, they used a Raspberry Pi and then they maybe did some custom software and they were actually able to, get a similar functionality, and it's called Roadie. So if you want to make your own Roadie, then keep watching. Otherwise, I hope this was useful and thanks for watching. Okay, if you are still here, then you are interested in how to set this thing up. Now, it is quite involved. There is a product out there called Roadie, which kind of does all of this for you that you can pay, a premium for. But I suspect Roadie has used the same software. It's definitely using the same hardware to set this up. So if you are interested, or at least curious on how they did it or how to set this up, then let's get into it. The first thing you need is obviously this thing. So this is the Raspberry Pi Zero W. It cost me about 20 Australian dollars. You could probably get it for cheaper. It's quite a cheap piece of kit. Basically, it's just a board with a microprocessor on it. You'll need your SD card. So I have a 64 gigabyte SD card in here. Now, the setup I'm using is called Teslausb. So let me just open this. It's this GitHub project called Teslausb. It's actually been forked by someone called Marcone. The original author was Simryan. I think that's how you say their name. But anyway, so Marcone has taken this and forked it, and he's still actively developing. So as you see, there's commits being made every 5 days ago and so on. So setting this up is actually relatively easy. If you've ever used a Raspberry Pi before, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to go through these steps, fairly briefly. If you really want to go in depth, I definitely recommend you heading to the GitHub page, giving this a thorough read before attempting this. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is grab your micro SD card. So I have a 64 gigabyte one here. Now, according to their GitHub page, about 16 gigabytes is kind of enough for the TeslaCam. Now, the TeslaCam kind of does 2 things. There's the driving footage. That only saves up to 1 hour of footage, according to this page. So anything more than 16 gigabytes, you're not going to get more than an hour of footage is what we're trying to say. Now, if you do get a lot of Sentry Mode events, then you might want a larger one. So according to the page, 16 gigabytes will allow you to save 1 hour of driving footage and then additional 1 hour of Sentry clips. I have a 64GB one, so if you have a larger one, or if you get more Sentry mode events, you can get a larger one. But for the driving footage, according to the page, Tesla only limits it to 1 hour of driving footage anyway. So for me, I'm using a 64GB one, and I'm going to use 32GB of that for the TeslaCam. So we'll go through that in a moment. Whoa, hold the phone. Okay, so having set this up several times, I have finally understood how this system actually works. So using the 64GB SD card as the example, now a little bit of space on the SD card is going to be used up by the Raspberry Pi OS, and the cam size is specifying how large the USB thumb drive will appear to be for the car. Now the car only writes to that cam folder, basically the USB thumb drive, and the network share doesn't actually directly share that USB thumb drive. It actually makes a copy of it using a snapshot system into a different part of the SD card, which is then shared via that SMB shared directory. So I'm going to try and describe this. I'm trying to draw it on the iPad. So here, I'm going to draw an SD card. So that's my SD card. Now there's a little space down here that's used by the Raspberry Pi. Okay, and then the cam size, we're going to specify 32GB because we have a 64GB SD card. This is the size that the car thinks the USB thumb drive is. So USB right here. Now the remaining space here, this is going to be used by the snapshot system. So every so often, so periodically, any files in here will get copied over to the snapshot system. And in this directory, it makes the same, TeslaCam folder, it makes the same, recents folder and everything. Only this part is actually shared via Wi-Fi, right? So this is the only part that gets shared. This just gets overwritten, as the car sees fit. So if your recent footage, exceeds 1 hour, for example, it will just wipe it. Whereas the snapshot system will then copy them over to this area over here before the car deletes them. That's why it can hold more footage than if you just plugged in a USB thumb drive. All right, so let's go back to the video. So once you get your SD card, you want to grab your reader, SD card reader, plug it in there, and then pop it into the computer. So with that popped in, it should show up somewhere here. There it is. So right now it says boot because I already have this formatted in the correct format for my Raspberry Pi. But don't worry, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to wipe this whole drive and then we're going to do this together. So after you have that plugged in, I recommend you go to this page, give this a thorough read. Some of it may not make sense, but still good to give it a thorough read. And then head to the pre-built image page. This is where we're going to download the Raspberry Pi image that we're going to flash onto this SD card. Use the latest one. So because we're using a Raspberry Pi 0W, the Buster image works, but I read that the Buster one doesn't work for the Raspberry Pi 4. So again, look at the hardware you got and find the relevant image that you need. So I already have this downloaded. It's already sitting in my downloads folder, so I'm not going to download it again. So with that downloaded, we're going to head to the Etcher page. So again, I'm going to link all these pages in the description. This is the software that's going to help us write the image onto our SD card. Again, I already have this downloaded, so I'm not going to download it again, but in the description, make sure you download this from the link. All right, so with that downloaded, we're going to open the Etcher app. This is what Etcher looks like. As soon as you open it, it kind of finds the SD card straight away automatically. If it's wrong, then click change, choose the right drive. After that, you want to select the image. So the image that we have is this Tesla Buster 2019 September 22. So grab that, click open, it'll load the image, and then if this is correct, the drive is correct, then click flash, and it will do its thing. So just go to put my password here, and it's going to write that image to the SD card. Okay, and that's done. So we can now close the Etcher app, and I'm just going to minimize this Chrome browser. Okay, so once that is written, once the image is written onto the SD card, we need to remount the SD card so that we can actually add a config file to it. So basically unplug your thumb drive or unplug your SD card reader with the SD card and plug it back in. Once it's plugged back in, give it a few seconds and it should show up again. It should show up as boot. So open the boot drive, and inside here we need to dump a Tesla USB setup variables.conf file. Now I have a sample file that I'm linking in the description, so go ahead and download that file, and it should look something like this. Basically, it's a configuration file that tells the Tesla USB Raspberry Pi image how to set itself up. When it boots up the first time, it connects to Wi-Fi, it downloads a whole bunch of packages, and it sets it up the way that you specified in this file. I'm going to go through this file in a little bit, and then we're going to talk about some of the important things that we need to know about. The first thing we need to talk about is the cam size. So this section up here, this basically tells the Raspberry Pi how much of the SD card you want to use as the Sentry mode, or to use for TeslaCam. Now I have a 64GB SD card, and I'm allocating 32GB for it. So about half the SD card is going to be allocated for TeslaCam. Now you can also allocate some size for music. So if you do want to put some MP3s or whatever on your SD card, you can give it a percentage here, and it'll allocate the size of that for music. Now the important thing, Wi-Fi wise, is down here. This Wi-Fi setup part is very important, because when you first boot the Raspberry Pi, it tries to connect to whatever Wi-Fi network that you set here, and then it will download a lot of packages. So a lot of software needs to be downloaded when you first boot up this image. So make sure you put in your home Wi-Fi network and the correct home Wi-Fi password, and make sure that it sits inside these quote marks. You need the quote mark at the start and at the end, otherwise it won't work. Now for me, I don't have good Wi-Fi coverage in my garage, so what I ended up doing was I ended up putting my phone's hotspot SSID, so the hotspot network name, and then the hotspot's password, and that way I was able to set it up while I was in the car. Now down here, this is how we get the Raspberry Pi to act as an access point, so to act as a hotspot basically. Now you can leave it as Teslausb, or you can call it whatever you want. I ended up calling it the name of my car. And also down here, you need to set a password for your Raspberry Pi's hotspot. So make sure you don't use password, otherwise it won't work. It says here that it won't work if the password is password. So make sure that you change it to a stronger password. And down here, you can leave everything else the same. So time zone, auto, that's perfectly fine. So this is the most basic stripped down version of the setup that I've got. So there's a link in the description that you can go ahead and download that. And basically all you need to change is the two Wi-Fi sections here. And if you really want, you can change the size of your SD card as well. All right, so once you have edited the Teslausb setup variables.conf to what you want, most importantly the Wi-Fi sections, you can then save a copy of that file, and then you can just basically drag it into the boot drive. Now make sure the name is correct, make sure it's called Teslausb setup variables.conf. Once that is in there, we can unmount the boot drive, and then we can unplug it from the computer, and we can take the SD card and plug it straight into the Raspberry Pi. So there we go. Now, you notice on the Raspberry Pi Zero, there are two micro USB ports. There is this one called PWR, power in, and then there's this one on the left marked with USB. The one you need to use is the one marked as USB, because that's the one that's going to be able to act as a USB thumb drive. Basically, this port has data, this port only does power. So make sure you use the middle one here, basically. So once you have that, we're gonna plug it into the computer to give it some power. And as soon as you do that, there is a flashing LED on the bottom right there. And the first thing it's gonna do is it's gonna try and connect to whatever Wi-Fi that you specified. Now I specified my phone, so I'm just gonna turn on the hotspot on my phone and give it a few seconds. And if you look down in the bottom right corner, it says hotspot. It should eventually show that there is one device connected. And that one device will be the Raspberry Pi on the right here. Okay, so there it is. It says one device, so that's the Raspberry Pi booting up and connecting to my Wi-Fi hotspot on my phone. Now I'm gonna go ahead and connect my laptop to the same Wi-Fi hotspot as well, so that we can actually monitor what the Raspberry Pi is actually doing. Okay, so now you see down here it says two devices are connected via hotspot. So I've connected both the computer and the Raspberry Pi Zero to the same hotspot from my phone. And while they're on the same network, we should be able to SSH into the Raspberry Pi Zero to see what it's doing. So to do that, basically open a terminal window, assuming you're using a Mac. Then you can SSH to Pi at teslausb.local. and it should ask if you want to trust the authenticity. Yes, and it needs a password. The default password is actually raspberry. So punch that in and it should let you log in. And there you go. So we are now in. Now to actually look at what's happening, the developer of Teslausb actually has a log file in the boot partition. So if we just change the directory to boot and then do an ls, you'll see there's something called Teslausb headless setup.log. So if we tail-f Tesla USB-headless, and there it is. So you can see what it's actually doing. So tail-f basically just keeps spitting out the last bit of this file onto the screen for us to see. So from here, we're able to monitor basically what this Raspberry Pi is doing at the moment. The LEDs don't always flash. So as you can see, it's doing stuff now, but the LEDs are not flashing. So it's good to just leave this running for about 10 minutes. Now, you don't have to SSH into the Raspberry Pi to monitor it if you don't want to. Just make sure that you have a working Wi-Fi network and it's connected to the correct, internet-enabled Wi-Fi network, and it should be able to basically download all this stuff in the background. So give this about 10 minutes and don't unplug it. So leave it working for 10 minutes, and once you see this flashing LED blinking once per second, then you know that it's ready. So I'll show you what that looks like when this is done. All right, so that's finished. So when it's finished, you actually see all done down here. So if you did SSH into the Raspberry Pi and read the logs, the log will actually say all done down the bottom. And when that happens, it'll actually close the SSH connection as well, because the Raspberry Pi actually reboots itself. After it reboots, you'll notice that the LED on the Raspberry Pi will be blinking about once per second. That's when you know everything is ready and it's actually already acting as a thumb drive. If you have this plugged into your computer, you'll actually notice that your computer now has a drive here called CAM. So it's not called boot anymore, it's called CAM. If you open that, you'll notice the TeslaCam folder that we saw earlier, and inside it will be empty because, well, we just wiped the card and it redid the setup. So that's about it for the setup. With that done, once you see the flashing LED there, everything is set up. So if we want, we can actually connect to this Raspberry Pi's Wi-Fi network, and let's do that. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm gonna start by turning off the hotspot. So again, you still see two devices connected to the hotspot because I have both the laptop and the Raspberry Pi still connected to the same hotspot on my phone. Turn that off, and then we're gonna go into the Wi-Fi settings, and you'll notice that I've already saved this, but I've actually set up my Raspberry Pi to be called EV because that's the name of my car, because it's an EV. All right, so once it's connected, it'll actually say no internet connection because the Raspberry Pi itself doesn't have a internet connection. So, it makes sense. So on Android, it'll actually complain. It'll actually say up here, EV has no internet options, has no internet access. And you actually have to click yes, stay connected. Otherwise, it won't actually use that Wi-Fi network for anything. So with that connected, you can use your favorite file browser to then mount the SMB drive and then basically view the files inside. So I'm going to demo some file browsers just to show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so the first file browser that I found to be working was called File Manager Explorer File Browser. I mean, terrible name, but whatever, it's by ES Applications. So install that, press open. And now if you go to the bottom here, there is SMB connection. So tap on that and it's actually showing up already. So there's Teslausb. Now, according to the config file, it should be .1. So if you click on that, it should open straight away and you'll see there is TeslaCam. So as you can see, the phone is actually not physically connected to anything. This is all because we are connected to the Raspberry Pi's Wi-Fi network. So with that, you can open that. But right now, there's actually nothing inside because we just set it up. So you won't be able to see any files, when you first set it up. But if you do plug this into your car, then you'll be able to see actually some files in here. So, save clips should be completely empty. Sentry clips should also be completely empty. So if there were files in there, you can tap on it, open a file and view it. So that's about it for the setup for a Teslausb to get a similar kind of result as Roadie. Now, unfortunately, there are some caveats. The first thing is you can't use, the better apps such as, TeslaCam reviewer. This app actually shows you all the different angles of the cameras, or like 4 or 5 cameras at the same time. Now, because TeslaCam Reviewer doesn't support SMB mounts, you can't actually view the files directly over the share, which is a bummer. I know the developer knows about Tesla USB, and he is thinking about supporting Samba shares. So hopefully one day this will be able to read the Raspberry Pi. But right now, all we can do is really use the file browser apps that do support SMB and then mount it and then view the clips one by one. So not as elegant as Roadie, but it's a kind of similar-ish result. So I hope this was useful, and thanks for watching. What? 20th century mode events? Let's take a look. Oh, it's just the guy leaving.